The wedding dress was still on when she ran. No shoes. No bag. No plan. Just Stephanie moving through the marble corridors of the most expensive hotel in New York, her veil torn, her hands shaking, the sound of her own heartbeat louder than the jazz band still playing 4 floors below. She had said yes at the altar 3 hours ago. She had meant it. Then she had walked into the bridal suite and found something on his phone that made the whole world tilt sideways. She didn't stop to think. She didn't stop to breathe. She just ran. Down the corridor. Past the ice machine. Past a startled bellhop who pressed himself against the wall as 6 feet of white silk and broken dreams flew past him. She hit the elevator button with her palm. The doors opened. She stepped in. And she was not alone. The man already inside the elevator looked at her the way you look at something that has just changed your entire evening. Dark eyes. Still jaw. A black tuxedo that had never been bought off a rack in its life. And the kind of presence that made the elevator feel half its size. Stephanie's hand hit the door close button. The doors slid shut. And somewhere in the city below them, the worst night of her life was about to become something she would never forget. Before I tell you what he said next, I need you to do something. If you have ever stood at the edge of a decision that terrified you and jumped anyway, this story is yours. Like this video right now. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, because the people who find these stories always find them at exactly the right moment. And if you know someone who stayed too long in something that was slowly erasing her, share this before you keep watching. Because the man in that elevator is not a good man. Every law enforcement agency on the East Coast has a file on him. 3 governments have tried and failed to touch him. But when the doors closed and he looked at the woman in the torn wedding dress standing barefoot on the elevator floor, he made a decision that was going to change both of their lives completely. Let's go back to where it really started. Stephanie Voss had spent 29 years being exactly what everyone needed her to be. Careful. Composed. Grateful. She had grown up in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Washington, D.C. with a mother who worked double shifts at a downtown hotel and a younger brother she had helped raise from the age of 12. She had put herself through college on academic scholarships and sheer refusal to quit. She had built a career as a contract attorney at a mid-sized firm in Manhattan, the kind of job that paid well enough and demanded everything. She was precise, methodical, the woman colleagues called when something needed to be done correctly the first time. She had learned very early that the world did not reward women who fell apart. So she didn't. Not when her mother got sick. Not when the medical bills came. Not even when Marcus Hale walked into her life 18 months ago with his easy smile and his family money and his ability to make her feel, for the first time in her adult life, like someone else was carrying half the weight. Marcus Hale was a financial consultant from a Connecticut family with old money and newer ambitions. He was charming in the specific way of men who have never been told no, effortlessly, without trying, the way some people breathe. He had pursued her with a patience that felt like devotion. He had proposed on a Tuesday evening in a restaurant in Massachusetts overlooking the water, and Stephanie had said yes with tears she hadn't expected and meant every one of them. The wedding had been Marcus's production entirely. 300 guests. A hotel ballroom in Midtown Manhattan that cost more per hour than Stephanie made in a week. A dress that had taken 4 fittings and made her feel, just briefly, like the kind of woman whose life turned out the way she had quietly hoped. The ceremony was perfect. The first dance was perfect. The toasts were perfect. And then Marcus had excused himself to take a call, urgent, business, just 5 minutes, and left his phone on the vanity in the bridal suite while he stepped into the corridor. Stephanie had not meant to look. The screen lit up on its own. A message notification from a name saved simply as C. She had glanced at it the way you glance at something that isn't yours. 1 line. Visible through the preview. Tonight then. After she's asleep. Same place as always. Stephanie stood very still. Her dress rustled slightly as she reached out and picked up the phone. Her passcode, his passcode, was the date they met. She had always found that romantic. She found the thread. She read it from the beginning. 12 months. Hundreds of messages. A woman named Clara who called him baby and sent photos and talked about the apartment Marcus had apparently been paying for in California for the last 8 months. Stephanie set the phone down. She looked at herself in the mirror above the vanity. The veil. The dress. The carefully pinned hair. The face of a woman who had just understood something completely and irrevocably. She did not cry. She picked up the hem of her dress and she walked out of the suite. She did not take her shoes. She did not take her bag. She did not take a single thing from that room that hadn't already been broken. She ran. And that was only the beginning. The elevator doors closed and the silence inside them was immediate and total. Stephanie pressed her back against the far wall, chest heaving, veil hanging half off her head, the hem of her dress damp from the hotel corridor floor. She had not looked at the man beside her yet. She was not ready to look at anything. But she felt him. The way you feel a weather change before it arrives. A low, controlled pressure in the air that had nothing to do with the confined space and everything to do with the specific quality of his stillness. She forced herself to look. He was tall. Broad through the shoulders in a way that his tuxedo acknowledged without advertising. Olive complexion, dark hair pushed back from a face that was all sharp angles and deliberate expression. Late 30s. A jaw that looked like it had been set in concrete and never moved without intention. His eyes were dark and completely calm and they were looking at her with the particular focus of a man who was rarely surprised and was currently, very slightly, surprised. His hands were at his sides. On the left one, a single ring, heavy gold, the kind that is not decorative. On the right, visible at the cuff, the edge of a tattoo that disappeared beneath fine Italian wool. He did not ask if she was okay. He did not reach for her or step toward her or perform any of the things men performed in moments like this. He simply looked at her with those dark unblinking eyes and waited. The elevator moved. Floors descended. Stephanie realized she had not pressed a button. Neither had he. They were going wherever the elevator had already been going before she arrived. She straightened. She was a contract attorney. She had argued in rooms full of men who did not want her to win. She could stand in an elevator. She could hold herself together for the length of a ride. Her name is Stephanie Voss, she said. Her voice came out steadier than she had any right to expect. And I know I look insane right now. The man's expression did not change. But something behind his eyes shifted. Just slightly. The way a door moves when someone on the other side puts their hand on the handle without opening it yet. You don't look insane, he said. His voice was low. The kind of voice that had never needed to be raised to be heard. You look like a woman who just made a very important decision. Stephanie stared at him. What decision? He looked at the elevator doors. The ones that had closed behind her. The one you made when you ran instead of stayed. The floor number above the doors ticked down. Lobby. Stephanie's mind was moving fast now. Her phone was in the suite. Her bag was in the suite. Her shoes were in the suite. Marcus was somewhere in the hotel with his phone and his other woman and 300 wedding guests who had no idea that the bride had just evaporated. She had nowhere to go. She had nothing on her. She was standing barefoot in a wedding dress in a Manhattan elevator next to a man she had never seen before who was looking at her like she was the most interesting thing that had happened to him in a very long time. The doors opened at the lobby. The sounds of the hotel flooded in. Music from the ballroom below. The murmur of the bar. A concierge speaking quietly into a phone. Stephanie did not move. Neither did he. The doors began to close again. She let them. He didn't stop them either. That told her something she wasn't ready to name yet. My name is Caruso, he said as the elevator rose again. Just Caruso. Stephanie looked at him. Something about the way he said it, not offering more, not apologizing for the brevity, told her that one word contained entire chapters she had not read yet. Where are you going? She asked. He looked at the numbers ascending above the door. Somewhere quiet, he said. You're welcome to come. And the thing that frightened her most was not that she considered it. It was how quickly she decided yes. The penthouse floor of the Meridian Hotel in Manhattan was not available to regular guests. It did not appear on the booking system. It did not have a button on the standard elevator panel. Caruso had produced a black key card from his jacket and pressed it to a reader Stephanie had not noticed, and the elevator had continued past the top listed floor to somewhere above it. The doors opened into a foyer that was nothing like the hotel below. Dark marble. Low lighting. The smell of cedar and something colder underneath, like winter air through an open window at height. Two men in dark suits stood at opposite ends of the corridor. They did not look at Stephanie. They looked at Caruso with the specific attention of people whose entire job was him. Caruso walked past them without acknowledgement and they stepped back without being asked. Stephanie followed because she had already decided and she was not a woman who unmade decisions. The suite was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed Manhattan below like a circuit board lit up and breathing. Dark furniture, clean lines, nothing decorative that wasn't also functional. A bar along one wall. A long dining table that had papers across it, organized in a way that looked like a language she didn't speak yet. Caruso shed his tuxedo jacket and handed it to one of the men who had appeared silently at his side. He stood in his dress shirt, the sleeves rolled once at the cuff, the tattoo on his right forearm now partially visible. It was intricate. Dense. The kind of ink that told a history instead of decorating one. He poured 2 glasses of something amber without asking her preference. He set one on the table near her. She looked at it. Then at him. "You should know something," Stephanie said. Her attorney's instinct was already working, already building a framework around what she knew and didn't know. "I have no idea who you are." Caruso sat on the edge of the low sofa, one arm resting on his knee, glass loose in his hand, posture that of a man completely at home in his own gravity. "You know my name," he said. "Everything else is context." "What kind of context?" she asked. "The kind that changes how people look at me before they know me," he said. He looked at her directly. "I'd prefer you form your own opinion." Stephanie stood in the middle of the most expensive room she had ever been in, barefoot, in a wedding dress, holding a glass of whiskey she hadn't asked for, and felt the strange specific sensation of her legal mind trying to categorize a situation that did not fit any category she had. "What do you want from me?" she asked. It was the question she always asked first in any negotiation. Define the terms. Understand the interest. Caruso looked at her for a long moment. "Nothing you haven't already decided to give," he said. "Right now that's just the company." Stephanie felt something in her chest move. Not fear. Something adjacent to it that was warmer and more dangerous. She sat down. On the opposite sofa. 2 feet of glass coffee table between them. She held the whiskey glass in both hands and looked out at Manhattan below and thought about Marcus in the ballroom downstairs, probably realizing by now that his bride had disappeared. She thought about 12 months of messages. About a woman named Clara in an apartment in California. About the way she had stood at that altar and meant every word and been the only one in the exchange who did. "You're not going to ask me what happened?" she said. Caruso looked at her. The question was a test. She knew it as soon as she heard herself ask it. He seemed to know it too. "When you want to tell me," he said simply, "I'll be here." Stephanie looked down at the glass in her hands. Nobody had ever said that to her before. Not like that. Not with that specific quality of patience that asked for nothing in return for offering everything. She took one breath. Then she told him. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. And he listened the way she had never been listened to, completely, without preparing his response, without waiting for his turn. He just received it. All of it. And when she finished, the room was quiet and Manhattan glittered below them, and Stephanie realized the most dangerous thing about this man was not whatever the context was that he hadn't told her yet. It was how safe he made her feel inside it. By morning she knew 3 things. The first was that Caruso had given her the second bedroom without being asked and had not appeared at the door once in the night. The second was that someone had placed a folded set of clothes outside her door before dawn, dark trousers, a cream cashmere sweater, flat shoes in exactly her size, without any explanation of how her size had been known. The third was that her name was already trending in a minor way on social media. Bride vanishes from Midtown wedding. Marcus had apparently told the guests she had fallen ill. The guests had apparently not entirely believed him. Stephanie sat on the edge of the bed in the borrowed clothes and looked at the cream sweater and thought about the kind of man who thought to provide one. Then she walked out into the main room. Caruso was at the long table, the papers organized differently now, a coffee in his right hand, his attention on a phone call he conducted in Italian so fast and quiet it sounded like water moving over stone. He saw her. He ended the call in one sentence. He stood. "You slept," he said. It wasn't a question. It was the quiet satisfaction of someone who had hoped for something and been right. She had slept. Deeply and completely, and without the low-grade anxiety that had lived in her chest for the last 18 months like a tenant who refused to leave. She didn't know what that meant yet. Coffee was on the bar. She poured a cup and stood at the window looking at Manhattan in the morning, gray and silver and vast and indifferent and magnificent. "Tell me the context," she said. She heard him set his coffee down. She didn't turn around. She was a contract attorney. She had learned that sometimes you got more truth when you weren't looking directly at someone. Behind her, Caruso was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Then he said, "My family has operated in New York for 3 generations. We control specific interests in real estate, finance, and other areas the law prefers not to examine too closely. I am the current head of that family. That makes me a target for certain people and a resource for others and entirely ungovernable by anyone." He paused. "Including, historically, myself." Stephanie turned around. He was standing at the table, both hands resting on it, looking at her with the direct honesty of a man who had decided to skip the performance. "I am not a good man in the way the word is commonly used," he said. "I have done things that cannot be undone. I protect people who work for me and I am ruthless with people who threaten them." He held her gaze. "I am telling you this now because you deserve to make a clear decision about whether you stay for breakfast." Stephanie looked at him. The tattoo on his forearm. The single gold ring. The eyes that had not flinched once since she had stepped into that elevator. She thought about Marcus, who had been safe on paper and catastrophic in practice. She thought about 12 months of being lied to by a man who looked like the right answer. She thought about what it felt like to be told the full truth by a man the world called dangerous. She walked to the table. She pulled out a chair and sat down across from him. "I'll stay for breakfast," she said. Something crossed his face. It moved too fast for her to name it. But it was real. She was certain of that. It was the most real thing she had seen on a man's face in 18 months. And just when she thought the morning might be simple, just 2 people and coffee and the particular relief of honesty, one of the suited men appeared at the edge of the room and said 3 words in Italian that made Caruso's entire expression change. Stephanie didn't speak Italian. But she understood the word that came next because it was a name. Marcus. Marcus Hale was in the building. And he had not come alone. Caruso did not raise his voice. He did not move quickly or reach for anything or change his posture in any visible way. He simply looked at the man who had delivered the information and said 2 words in Italian and the man disappeared. Then he looked at Stephanie. She was already standing. Her attorney's mind had processed the information in under 3 seconds and arrived at the only logical conclusion: Marcus had used the hotel's guest records or a contact or money, which he had plenty of, to find her. And whatever version of Marcus Hale was standing downstairs was not the charming man from the Connecticut family. It was the version that had been sending messages to Clara for 12 months and smiling at Stephanie across a dinner table while doing it. That version, she understood now, was the only real one. "He tracked me," she said. Her voice was steady. The steadiness of a woman who had learned a long time ago that panic was a luxury she could not afford. Caruso looked at her with an expression that contained something she would understand later, the specific look of a man recalibrating the scale of his own response based on what a woman chose to do instead of fall apart. "How do you want to handle this?" he asked. The question landed like a gift. Not "I'll handle it." Not "stay here." "How do you want to handle this?" Like she was the architect of her own next move. Stephanie straightened. She was still in the cashmere sweater and borrowed trousers. She had no phone, no bag, no shoes of her own. But she was a contract attorney who had spent 7 years learning how to walk into rooms where the power was arranged against her and rearrange it through precision and nerve. "Tell him I'll come down," she said. Caruso went very still. "Stephanie," he said. Her name in his mouth for the first time. She felt it land somewhere she noted and set aside for later. "I know what I'm doing," she said. He looked at her for a long 3 seconds. Then he nodded. He did not offer to come with her. He did not try to override her. He simply said, "I'll be where you can reach me." And that, more than anything else that had happened in the last 12 hours, was what made her certain she was in the right room. The lobby bar was quiet at this hour. Morning light through tall windows, a bartender polishing glasses at the far end, two guests at a corner table with laptops. Marcus stood near the entrance in yesterday's suit, his tie loosened, his face carrying the specific tight expression of a man who had been managing a narrative all night and was running out of energy to maintain it. He saw her. His shoulders dropped with what looked like relief and might have been. "Come on, Stephanie," he said. His voice low, urgent, the voice he used when he wanted to resolve something quickly and privately. "Let's just go home." Stephanie stopped 6 feet from him. She had chosen the distance deliberately. Close enough for a private conversation. Far enough that he could not reach her without taking a step she would see coming. "I read the messages," she said. Marcus's face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Surprise. Calculation. The decision to minimize. "Baby," he said. "That's not, I read all of them," she said. 12 months. 347 messages. The apartment in California. The credit card statements I now understand. She kept her voice level and precise. The way she kept her voice in depositions. The way she kept it when she was taking something apart and needed to be sure every piece landed exactly where she placed it. Marcus looked around the lobby. His instinct, she knew now, was always to manage the audience first. "There is no audience here," Stephanie said. "It's just us." He looked back at her. His jaw tightened. "You embarrassed me in front of 300 people," he said. And there it was. Not "I'm sorry." Not "you deserved better." The first thing out of his mouth was what she had cost him. Stephanie felt the last thread of uncertainty she had been carrying about her own judgment dissolve completely. "I want a divorce," she said. "I'll have the papers drafted by the end of the week." "And Marcus," she held his gaze, "I kept copies of everything." He stared at her. She turned and walked back toward the elevator. Behind her she heard him call her name once, sharp and disbelieving. She did not turn around. The elevator doors opened. She stepped in. And Caruso was standing inside it. She looked at him. He looked at her. "Well?" he asked. She pressed the button for the penthouse floor. "It's done," she said. And she almost smiled. He did smile. Just barely. Just enough. 6 weeks later, Stephanie Voss sat at a desk in a small office she had rented in Lower Manhattan, 3 rooms, a window that looked out over the street below, her name on the frosted glass door in clean black letters, and signed the last page of her resignation from Harmon and Associates. She had given 3 weeks' notice. She had taken her client files, her reputation, and exactly nothing else. She was opening her own firm. Contract law, dispute resolution, financial fraud cases specifically. She had 3 clients already. The 4th was pending. The 4th was Caruso. Not because he had asked. Because she had offered, after reading the summary of a contractual dispute his organization was navigating through a Massachusetts holding company, and seeing 3 places in the existing legal framework where someone more precise than his current counsel could dismantle the opposing argument completely. She had told him this over dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant in Connecticut, his choice. He had said he knew the owner, and he had looked at her across the table with an expression that she had learned by now meant he was choosing his words with specific care. "You understand what it means to work for me," he said. "For your organization," Stephanie corrected. He accepted the correction with a nod that managed to be both amused and serious. She understood what it meant. She had spent 2 weeks doing exactly the kind of due diligence her legal training demanded, reading, researching, sitting with the full weight of who he was and what his world contained. It was not clean. It was not simple. There were things in it she would never touch directly and had told him so precisely and without apology. He had said, "I wouldn't want you to." And she had believed him. Because in 6 weeks Caruso had not once asked her to be smaller than she was. He had not suggested she soften her precision or moderate her directness or pretend to need things she didn't need. He had met her at her exact dimensions and found them interesting. That was rarer than dangerous. That was the rarest thing she had ever encountered. The divorce papers had been filed. Marcus had contested initially, then stopped contesting when Stephanie's documentation made clear that her copies of the messages, combined with the financial irregularities she had identified in their joint accounts, created a picture that no attorney would advise him to take to court. He had signed. Quietly. Quickly. The way people sign things when they understood the alternative. Stephanie had felt nothing when the confirmation arrived except a clean, surgical sense of completion. A chapter closed properly. The way she liked things closed. That evening she walked to the Italian restaurant in Connecticut where Caruso was already seated. He stood when she walked in. He always stood. She had stopped pretending she didn't notice. She sat across from him. He poured her wine without asking because he had learned by now that she always wanted the same thing and she had learned by now that she didn't mind him knowing. She told him about the firm. About the signed resignation. About the 3 clients and the 4th pending. He listened the way he always listened, completely, without filling the space, without performing interest he already had. When she finished he looked at her for a long moment. "What?" she said. "You did all of that," he said quietly, "in 6 weeks. From a hotel elevator in a torn wedding dress." Stephanie looked at her wine glass. "I had a clear head for the first time in 18 months, she said. He reached across the table. His hand rested beside hers. Not on it. Beside it. An offer without a demand. She looked at his hand. The gold ring. The tattoo at his wrist. The specific and deliberate patience of a man who had decided she was worth waiting for and was not in any hurry because he was absolutely certain of the outcome. She placed her hand over his. His fingers closed around hers carefully. Like something he understood was rare. They sat like that through dinner. Talking about everything and nothing. Manhattan hummed somewhere behind them. Connecticut settled into its winter quiet outside the windows. And Stephanie Voss, who had run barefoot from a wedding 6 weeks ago with nothing but a torn dress and the clarity that comes from finally seeing the truth, sat in a warm restaurant in the most complicated and honest and certain thing she had ever chosen and felt, for the first time in her life, exactly where she was supposed to be. Not rescued. Not repositioned. Chosen. Fully. By someone who had seen her at her most undone and decided that was exactly the version he wanted to know. If you stayed through this entire story, drop a comment right now and tell me, what is the one thing you are finally walking away from today? Because Stephanie didn't get a perfect ending. She got something better. A firm with her name on the door. A divorce that closed cleanly. A man who told her the truth before she asked for it. And the absolute knowledge that the worst night of her life was the first night of everything that actually mattered. Share this with someone who needs to remember that running isn't losing. Sometimes running is the most intelligent thing you have ever done. Episode 2 is coming. And you are not ready.